Coming up on Arirang News, South Korean President Moon Jae-in says the most urgent task for his administration is to bring down home prices so ordinary people can afford them. Speculation on real estate in the Seoul area especially has been rampant. South Korea reports another 48 cases of COVID-19. The health authorities are encouraging local governments to adjust measures as needed, like social distancing. And Hyundai Motor has become the first company in the world to export a hydrogen-powered car. It sent 10 of them today to Switzerland and plans to ship thousands more in the next few years. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea reported another 48 cases of COVID-19 on Monday. Health officials say while they are not considering raising the level of social distancing just yet, they are encouraging local governments to act swiftly. Choi Jung-yoon reports.
Another 48 new cases of COVID-19 were confirmed in South Korea on Monday, falling below 50 for the first time in 6 days after having 3 straight days of 60 or more infections. However, Seoul, Gyeonggi-do Province, Daejeon, and Gwangju are continuing to see cluster infections. Of the daily cases, 24 were local transmissions, with nearly 1/3 of those cases coming from the southwestern city of Gwangju, once considered a safe haven from the virus.
The situation doesn't call for raising the social distancing level yet, but the speed of detection is not following the fast spread. We are trying to prevent further spread, but the current situation under level 1 social distancing is still very concerning.
The central government is, on the other hand, actively supporting local governments that increase their social distancing level independently, as implementing different countermeasures depending on the medical resources and circumstances of each city or province is thought to be more efficient. Jeollanam-do Province raised its distancing level to level 2 on Monday, following the same move by Gwangju last Thursday. Under distancing level 2, indoor events of more than 50 people and outdoor events of more than 100 people are entirely banned. Visiting nursing homes is prohibited, and cohort quarantine is imposed to restrict the chance of spread among residents and workers. Sports events must also run without any audiences, and schools might be closed again after local governments negotiate with education offices. Meanwhile, health authorities emphasize that people should keep up their own individual distancing efforts, saying the number of infections with uncertain transmission routes has increased over the last 2 weeks. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
In a forthcoming paper, more than 200 scientists are urging the World Health Organization to give more attention to the coronavirus spreading through the smallest of droplets produced by just talking, for example. These linger in the air for hours, unlike droplets from sneezing or coughing. Other scientists have found that the virus is mutated to become even more infectious, but not more deadly. Lee Kyung-un reports.
COVID-19 could be harder to stop than previously thought. The New York Times has reported that airborne transmission of the coronavirus is possible. It says some 239 experts from 32 countries have sent an open letter to the World Health Organization saying that tiny particles smaller than droplets may linger in the air for hours, infecting people even in socially distant settings. That's contrary to the WHO, which has long insisted that the primary mode of transmission is large respiratory droplets that quickly fall to the ground, and that airborne transmission only occurs in hospital during medical procedures. Even until very recently, it has denied the possibility of airborne transmission, citing lack of evidence. And South Korea echoed the WHO stance on Monday following the news.
We can discuss the matter once objective evidence comes out. So far, we believe that more studies and evidence should be found in order for the country to officially confirm the possibility of airborne transmission.
Other studies have found that the virus has mutated, making it more infectious than before. In a study published in the journal Cell, the new G variant of the coronavirus is dominant globally and is 6 times more infectious than the previous version. That's also had an impact on South Korea, with the country confirming that the GH variant under the G group has been the most common strain in the country since April.
In recent months, the GH strain has been the major trend in COVID-19 cases in South Korea. We believe that's because a lot of entrants came to the country during March to April, and the virus they've imported is the major source of transmission.
An expert said, however, the key is how major the mutation is, and so far, no major mutation has occurred to make the vaccine development go back to square one. Lee Young-eun, Arirang News.
South Korea's nominee for Unification minister says talks between the two Koreas and between North Korea and the U.S. must continue no matter what. In his first interview since being nominated, Lee In-young said a creative approach is needed for lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. He also emphasized the importance of dialogue with the North.
North Korea sometimes initiates talks with the South and the U.S. at the same time, or with one before the other. For us, it's important to continue the momentum of dialogue, whether it be inter-Korean talks or talks between the North and the U.S.
Lee said he hoped to build a bridge to the resumption of inter-Korean talks and humanitarian cooperation so Korea's dream of unification can be realized. President Moon Jae-in says the biggest task at hand for the South Korean government is to cool down the country's overheated property market so people can afford homes. In a meeting with his top aides on Monday, Moon also asked for the cooperation of the National Assembly, saying that the government's policies need legislative backing to bear fruit. Take a listen.
정부는 최선을 다해 부동산 투기를 억제하고 실수요자를 보호하며 서민들과 청년들의 주거 안정을 위한 대책을 강력히 추진해 나가겠습니다. 이미 작년에 내놓은 12, 16 대책과 최근의 6.17 대책은 물론 곧 내놓을 정부의 추가 대책까지 포함하여 국회에서 신속히 입법으로 뒷받침해 주어야 실효를 거둘 수 있습니다.
The president recently ordered the government to put more pressure on individuals who own multiple homes and to seek ways for first-time buyers to be able to buy. Moon also thanked the National Assembly for passing the government's roughly $30 billion extra budget proposal, saying that what's important now is timely implementation. He asked for continued cooperation from rival parties, with a new parliamentary session kicking off today to minimize the economic fallout from COVID-19 and to prepare for the post-coronavirus era. In particular, he stressed the need to pass a bill that would elevate the status of the Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to an independent agency to strengthen the quarantine system in preparation for a second wave. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, Professor of Economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you as always for coming on.
Happy to be here.
Well, the U.S. markets were closed on Friday for Independence Day. A lot of concerns about the coronavirus outbreak in America, but the futures are up right now. Korean stocks significantly higher today. What's the story in the global markets?
Okay, well, as you mentioned, the U.S. markets did have a very good week last week. Dow went up by 3.3%, S&P by 4%, and NASDAQ by 4.6%. And then it turned out that the second quarter in the United States was the best quarterly performance that the U.S. stock market had seen in decades. Dow went up by 17%, S&P by 20%, and NASDAQ by 30%. No one's quite sure why the stock market is doing so well. There's some speculation that it's because of individual investors, what they call the Eastern ants in Korea, the United States call the Robin Hood investors. But there's more than unusually large number of individual investors investing in the stock market in the United States. Also, last week they had a boost because the unemployment figures for June was lower than what a lot of analysts expected at 11.1%. But there does seem to be quite a bit of disconnect between how the stock market is doing and the real economy. So there's also a rising concern about bubbles. The other stock markets in Europe and Asia, they seem to have taken their cue from the United States. They're not necessarily doing as well as the United States, but they have been in the rising trend last week. That includes the Nikkei, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, though Hong Kong personally seems a bit surprising because of all the troubles they had in the last couple of weeks. But still, the stock market as a whole seemed to be rising, and KOSPI and the Kosdaq was no exception. KOSPI from Tuesday to Friday rose by 2.8%, and it rose today by 1.7%. Kosdaq, it rose from last Wednesday. It rose last week from Wednesday to Friday, 3.4%, and then today, additional 1.0%.
Well, now, with the issue of U.S.-China trade on top of the coronavirus, we have people going to assets they see as safe, like gold. In terms of Korean won, the gold price as of the end of June was up 22% year to date. What do you see happening with gold?
Okay, well, in periods of global instability, gold prices usually go up as investors move to secure assets. And it seems to be what's happening in the United States as well, though it is surprising that both stock prices and gold prices are rising at the same time. Now, with the Korean won price of gold, you also have to figure in the Korean won depreciation. If you just look at the global price of gold in dollars, it rose by 9.8% this year so far. It started out this year at $1,617. It ended on July 6th on $1,774.97. And since September 2018, it's been more or less a steady increase. So there has been a slightly unusual situation in March when we saw the stock market drop because of the coronavirus. One of the really interesting things that happened there was that gold prices dropped as well. On March 9th, it was $1,680, and then on the 19th, it fell to $1,471, which is very unusual. If the stock market falls like that, gold prices usually rise, but it seems that there were some legal requirements that the investors had to pay back some obligations in cash during that week, so that caused a run on cash, which actually dropped gold prices. But since then, it's recovered to more or less what we see regularly, which is that when the global instability is rising, the gold prices are rising as well. Now, it ended on July 6th at $1,774. Historically, there were couple of times, there was one time that it rose higher than this, which was on July 2011, when it hit $1,837. And inflation-wise, there were two times when you adjust for inflation, the gold prices rose two times higher than where it is right now, which was August 2011 and January 1980. That was during the second oil shock. So if the coronavirus continues, then there is a possibility that gold prices will rise as well. But I also should mention that we saw a gold price drop quite rapidly when economy returned to stability.
Right. Well, Professor, we're almost out of time, but before we go, what should we be looking ahead to this week?
Okay, well, this week it's actually a fairly quiet week for statistics. There's international accounts numbers coming out from the Bank of Korea, and financial market trends and international financial market trends also by Bank of Korea coming in this week. Neither it will be too surprising. The curious thing that we should be looking out for is that, well, the international account numbers are for May, and the May trade account was slightly in surplus at $400 million. It'll be interesting to see if the current account is also positive, or if current account it will be negative because of the service trade deficits.
All right, Professor Yang, we'll catch up with you in a couple of days. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
South Korea's Hyundai Motor has become the world's first company to export hydrogen-powered trucks. It shipped 10 of them today, a model called the Xcient, to Switzerland. Hyundai aims to export 40 more of them by the end of this year and 1,600 in total by 2025. Hyundai's already established the infrastructure to mass produce the trucks. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, Hyundai Motor Group's heir apparent, Chung Gi-sun, will be meeting with the chairman of SK Group, Choi Tae-won, to bolster their company's ties in electric cars. SK Innovation is one of the world's leading battery producers. South Korea has overtaken Taiwan to become the world's top exporter of solid-state drives, or SSD, a type of memory storage used in laptops, game consoles, and other devices. According to the International Trade Center, in the first quarter of this year, South Korea exported around $2.3 billion of SSD. Taiwan shipped slightly over $2 billion. They both got roughly a fourth to a fifth of the global market. This is the first time in the 13 years South Korea has disclosed its SSD export figures that it's ranked #1. The number of people migrating to the greater Seoul area from other regions has doubled in the pandemic, largely people looking for work. According to the Korea Employment Information Service, 27,500 people moved to the capital region in March and April, compared to 12,800 people in the same period last year. More than 75% of those were in their 20s. The agency attributed this to COVID-19, saying people tend to move to the Seoul area when the economy is bad. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.